Hey guys! Tonight, we're stepping back nearly 2,000 years to walk the sun-baked streets of ancient Pompeii, a city frozen in time, where bakeries still hold loaves of bread turned to stone, where graffiti jokes remain etched on walls, and where ordinary people lived extraordinary final hours. Before you drift off, imagine the warmth of Mediterranean sun on your face, the smell of fresh bread and wine, the chatter of a bustling Roman city that had no idea August 24th, 79 AD would be its last day. Before we begin, take a second to like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy drifting off to the sound of ancient history. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and whether you've ever visited Pompeii or dreamed of time travel. I read every single one, usually when I can't sleep either. Now, dim your lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background noise, and get comfortable. Pull up your blankets, adjust your pillow, and let's walk together through a city that time forgot to warn. The roosters crow as pale light creeps over the Bay of Naples. It's early morning on August 24th, 79 AD, and Pompeii is waking up the way it has for centuries, slowly, lazily, with the smell of baking bread drifting through narrow streets and the distant sound of cartwheels on stone. You stand at the city gates as a merchant, having traveled from Rome with your wagon full of oil amphora and cheap jewelry. The guards barely glance at you. They've seen 1,000 faces like yours, and frankly, they're more interested in finishing their breakfast of figs and watered wine than inspecting every barrel that comes through. The city spreads before you like a sprawling maze. Pompeii in 79 AD isn't Rome. It's smaller, more intimate, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone's business and gossip travels faster than official proclamations. About 20,000 people called this place home, though that number swells during festival days and market weeks when farmers and traders pour in from the surrounding countryside. The streets are already busy. A baker's apprentice rushes past you with a basket of fresh loaves balanced on his head, shouting something about late deliveries. Two women lean out of second-story windows, arguing about whose turn it is to fetch water from the public fountain. A dog, one of those small, yappy varieties that wealthy Romans adore, escapes from a doorway and nearly trips you before its owner, a woman in an expensive stola, swoops it up with an exasperated sigh. You notice the streets themselves are remarkable. Unlike the muddy tracks of many ancient cities, Pompeii's roads are paved with large, irregular stones that fit together like a giant's puzzle. Raised stepping stones allow pedestrians to cross without getting their feet wet when the streets are cleaned or when rain turns the gutters into streams. The spaces between the stones are perfectly sized for cartwheels, a bit of ancient traffic engineering that still works beautifully after nearly 2 millennia. The buildings press close on either side. Most are 2 stories tall, with shops occupying the ground floors and living quarters above. The facades are painted in warm colors, ochre, red, and yellow, though the paint is fading and peeling in places, giving the city a comfortably worn-in feeling. Some walls are covered in graffiti. You pause to read a few. Marcus loves Spendusa, someone has scratched near a tavern door. Successus the Weaver loves Iris, innkeeper's slave girl, but she doesn't care for him, reads another, followed by a bitter addition. A rival wrote this. The early morning air is already warm. By afternoon, it will be sweltering, the kind of heat that makes people retreat indoors and wait for evening. But for now, the temperature is perfect, that brief window when Mediterranean summers feel like a blessing rather than a curse. Mount Vesuvius looms in the distance, its slopes covered in vineyards and olive groves. It's been quiet for so long that most people have forgotten it's a volcano. Some elderly residents remember earth tremors 17 years ago in 62 AD that damaged many buildings, but those have been repaired. The mountain is just scenery now, as permanent and harmless as the sky. You make your way toward the Forum, the heart of the city, where business is conducted and news is shared. The cobblestones are already warm under your sandals. Somewhere, a craftsman is hammering metal, the rhythmic clang echoing between buildings. A fuller's workshop releases the sharp smell of urine used for cleaning wool. It's not pleasant, but it's familiar, the scent of commerce and industry.
As you walk, you pass a shrine to the household gods. An old woman is placing offerings, bread, honey, wine on the altar, muttering prayers. Religion here is everywhere and nowhere, woven into daily life so thoroughly that people barely think about it. Every home has its lararium, every street corner its shrine, every business its protective deity. The forum opens before you, a large rectangular space surrounded by columns and impressive buildings. The Temple of Jupiter dominates the northern end, its steps leading up to a facade that tries very hard to look imposing, despite being somewhat weather-beaten. To your left, the Basilica, the law court and business center, is already filling with men in togas engaged in animated conversations that probably involve money. Market stalls are setting up along the edges of the forum. A fishmonger arranges his catch. The fish are so fresh they're still gasping, having been pulled from the bay just hours ago. A vegetable seller creates pyramids of onions, leeks, and cabbages, occasionally shooing away children who eye the produce with hungry intent. Another stall offers ceramics, amphorae of all sizes, bowls painted with simple geometric patterns, oil lamps decorated with erotic scenes that would make modern museum curators blush. You notice the social stratification immediately. Wealthy men in white togas trimmed with purple move through the crowd like ships parting water, slaves and clients clearing paths before them. These are the men who own the large houses with mosaic floors and painted walls, who sponsor gladiatorial games and donate to temple restorations to buy political influence and social status. Then there are the merchants and shopkeepers, free men of more modest means, dressed in simpler tunics, their hands showing the stains and calluses of their trades. They're the backbone of the city's economy, neither wealthy enough to be influential nor poor enough to be invisible. And everywhere, threading through the crowd, are slaves. They carry burdens, run errands, attend their masters, and generally do the work that keeps Roman society functioning. Some wear simple tunics, barely distinguishable from free workers. Others, the household slaves of wealthy families, are better dressed than many free citizens, a peculiar Roman contradiction where your legal status and your apparent prosperity don't always align. The city is a sensory overload. Smells compete for attention: baking bread, roasting meat, perfume from a cosmetic shop, the acrid tang of dye from a fuller's workshop, the salty freshness of sea breeze mixing with human sweat. Sounds layer upon sounds, conversations in Latin and Greek and local Oscan dialect, the cries of vendors, the clip-clop of mules, children laughing, dogs barking, somewhere a flute player practicing scales. You find a place to rest near a fountain where water spouts from a carved lion's mouth. The fountain is one of dozens scattered throughout the city, fed by an impressive aqueduct system that brings fresh water from the mountains. People gather here to fill jugs, to gossip, to arrange assignations. Fountains are the social media of the ancient world. A group of men nearby are arguing about chariot racing, the blues versus the greens apparently, with the passion of modern sports fans who've forgotten it's just entertainment. Their voices rise and fall, hands gesturing dramatically. One man becomes so animated that he spills his wine, prompting laughter from his companions. You watch a family pass, a father, mother, and 3 children. The youngest barely walking. The mother carries a baby wrapped in cloth, its head covered against the sun. The children are laughing about something, their voices high and clear. The father is explaining something in patient tones, gesturing toward the temple. It's such an ordinary moment, such a universal scene of family life, that for a second you forget you're watching ghosts. Because that's what everyone here is. though they don't know it yet. Ghosts with warm-skinned and loud voices, going about their morning routines with no idea that the mountain in the distance is about to teach the world about the terrible power of nature. The sun climbs higher. The day grows warmer. People go about their business with the comfortable confidence of routine. There's bread to bake, wool to clean, fish to sell, deals to make, gossip to share. Just another ordinary day in Pompeii. Except, it's not. But we'll get to that. For now, let's follow the morning as it unfolds, as people wake and wash and eat and argue and laugh and work, as they have every morning for as long as anyone can remember in a city that thinks it will last forever.
Let's step inside one of Pompeii's typical homes. Not a grand villa belonging to the aristocracy, but a comfortable house owned by a prosperous merchant. The kind of dwelling that represents the middle layer of Roman society, neither palatial nor cramped, but solid and respectable. The house is built around a central atrium, an open courtyard with a pool in the center to catch rainwater. This pool, called the impluvium, serves both practical and aesthetic purposes. It collects water for the household, while also reflecting light and providing a sense of open space in what is otherwise a fairly compact design. The master of the house, we'll call him Lucius, wakes before dawn. He's a man in his 40s, successful enough to own this house and maintain a household of 6 slaves, but not so wealthy that he can afford to be lazy. His bedroom opens directly onto the atrium, separated from the main space by a heavy curtain rather than a door. Privacy in Roman homes is more suggestion than absolute. Sounds carry, conversations drift, and everyone knows everyone else's business. He rises from his bed, a wooden frame with leather straps supporting a mattress stuffed with wool and reeds. It's not uncomfortable exactly, but it's certainly not what modern people would recognize as plush. His wife, Julia, continues sleeping beside him. She's pregnant with their 4th child, and he lets her rest while he begins his morning routine. A slave named Marcus appears with a basin of water and a towel. The water is cold. Heating water is expensive and time-consuming, requiring charcoal and patience. Lucius splashes his face, runs wet hands through his hair, and considers this adequate washing for the morning. A proper bath will come later at the public thermae, where he'll meet with business associates and hear the latest city gossip. Dressing is simple. A tunic of undyed wool goes over his head, reaching to his knees. Over this, if he were planning to conduct formal business, he might wear a toga, that elaborate draped garment that screams Roman citizen, but is actually uncomfortable and impractical for anything except standing still and looking important. Today, just the tunic will do. He runs his fingers through his beard. Fashions in facial hair have changed since Augustus's day, and now respectable men are expected to be clean-shaven. Lucius plans to visit the barber later, both for grooming and for the social experience. Barbershops in Pompeii are like ancient coffee shops, places where men gather to talk, debate, and exchange news. The household begins to stir. Another slave, a woman named Tertia, appears to light the charcoal in the small kitchen at the back of the house. Romans don't eat elaborate breakfasts, usually just bread dipped in wine or water, maybe some cheese or olives. Elaborate meals are reserved for the late afternoon cena, the main meal of the day. Lucius's 2 older children emerge from their rooms, a boy of 12 and a girl of 10. They're old enough to have their own sleeping quarters, small rooms off the atrium with simple beds and chests for clothing. The boy, Gaius, is already complaining about something. He has lessons today with a grammaticus, a private tutor, who will drill him in Greek and rhetoric until his head aches. The girl, Lucia, is quieter. She helps her mother with household management, learning the skills she'll need as a wife and household manager herself someday. Though Romans send boys to formal schools, girls' education happens at home,
focusing on practical skills, weaving, household accounts, supervising slaves, maintaining family religious observances. The family gathers in the atrium for a quick breakfast. The slaves have set out bread from yesterday's baking, a wedge of sheep's milk cheese, and some dried figs. A jug of posca, wine mixed with water and sometimes vinegar, serves as the morning beverage. Drinking undiluted wine is considered barbaric. Civilized people always cut it with water. Conversation is minimal. Lucius is already thinking about his day. He needs to check on a shipment of wine amphorae that should have arrived from Crete, settle a dispute with a business partner about warehouse fees, and possibly attend a showing of new gladiators that a local magistrate is sponsoring. Julia reminds him that they're low on olive oil and that the household shrine needs new offerings. The household shrine, the lararium, occupies a niche in the atrium wall. It's a small painted altar showing the family's protective deities, the lares, household spirits, and the genius of the pater familias, the divine aspect of the family's male head. Every morning, someone makes offerings, bread, wine, sometimes a bit of incense, and says prayers for the family's protection and prosperity. This morning, young Lucia performs the ritual under her mother's watchful eye. She places a piece of bread and pours a splash of wine before the altar, then bows her head and recites the familiar prayers. It's a routine act, done without much conscious thought, but it's important. To neglect the household gods is to invite misfortune. Outside, the city is fully awake now. Through the open door, Romans keep their front entrances open during the day, both for air circulation and to signal hospitality. You can hear the street coming to life. Someone is selling pastries door to door, calling out his wares in a sing-song voice. A fight breaks out somewhere. Raised voices, threats, then laughter. False alarm, apparently. Lucius heads out, leaving Julia to manage the household. She has her own busy day ahead, supervising the slaves in their cleaning duties, planning the afternoon meal, perhaps visiting a friend, definitely making time for her own bath at the women's section of the thermae. We follow Lucius into the street. The morning sun is bright now, reflecting off whitewashed walls and creating sharp shadows. The heat is building. Men walk with deliberate slowness, conserving energy. A few wear broad-brimmed hats to shade their faces, though most just endure the sun with the resignation of people who've never known air conditioning. He stops at a thermopolium, basically a fast food restaurant, where he orders a cup of hot wine mixed with honey and spices. The shop is just a counter open to the street, with large clay vessels set into the marble top, each containing different foods or drinks kept at various temperatures. The smell is appetizing: roasted meat, baked bread, wine, garum, that ubiquitous Roman fish sauce that flavors everything.
While he drinks, Lucius exchanges greetings with other regular customers. They discuss the upcoming games. Apparently, a wealthy magistrate is sponsoring a full day of gladiatorial combat to celebrate his son's coming of age. There's speculation about which fighters will appear, whether there will be beast hunts, how spectacular the executions will be during the midday break. This is a society where watching people and animals die violently is considered prime entertainment, remember. Modern sensibilities struggle with this, but for Romans, the games are moral theater, displays of courage, punishment of criminals, demonstrations of the natural order where Rome dominates all. Or at least, that's how they justify it. Really, people just enjoy the spectacle. Lucius also hears complaints about the water supply. Apparently, one of the aqueduct's distribution points has been diverted to fill someone's private fish pond, reducing flow to a public fountain. This kind of petty corruption is constant. People with influence bend public resources to private use, while everyone else grumbles and adapts. Finished with his wine, Lucius continues toward his warehouse near the Forum. The streets are narrow, barely wide enough for 2 carts to pass. Buildings lean close, their upper stories sometimes extending over the street to create welcome shade. Balconies project from second floors, and residents often toss waste into the street below, despite laws against it. Walking requires constant attention to avoid stepping in something unpleasant. He passes various shops, each identifiable by smell and sound before sight. A bakery releases clouds of steam and the yeasty smell of rising dough. A fuller's establishment reeks of urine and sulfur. Unpleasant but profitable work, cleaning and dyeing wool. A bronzesmith's hammer rings steadily against metal. A perfume shop offers a welcome contrast, its doors wafting scents of rose and cinnamon and exotic spices from the east. At a street corner, a small crowd has gathered around a notice board. These boards are all over the city, covered with announcements, advertisements, and political slogans. Lucius pauses to read. The gladiatorial troupe of Aulus Suetius Certus will fight at Pompeii on May 31. There will be a hunt and awnings. Good fortune to all Pompeii. I ask you to elect Marcus Cyrenius Vatia to the aedileship. All the late drinkers support him. Florus and Fructus wrote this. 20 pairs of gladiators of Decimus Lucretius Satrius Valens, lifetime flamen of Nero Caesar, son of Augustus, and 10 pairs of gladiators of Decimus Lucretius Valens, his son, will fight at Pompeii on April 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There will be a regular hunt and awnings. Politics, entertainment, advertising. It's all there on public walls, just like modern social media, but written in careful Latin script by professional sign painters. Lucius finally reaches his warehouse, where his business partner, Gaius, is already present, looking irritated. The Cretan wine hasn't arrived. The ship is delayed, bad winds apparently. This is frustrating but not catastrophic. Roman business operates on looser timelines than modern commerce. Delays are expected, built into calculations. They discuss alternatives. Perhaps they can get similar wine from a different source, or maybe they should wait. Cretan wine is popular, and waiting might allow them to charge higher prices. It's the eternal merchant's calculation, risk versus reward, patience versus opportunity. While they talk, slaves move through the warehouse, organizing amphoras, checking inventory, making notes on wax tablets. The building is dark and cool, a welcome respite from the street's heat. Dust motes float in the shaft of sunlight coming through the door. Outside, a cart rumbles past, its wheels loud on stone. This is everyday life in Pompeii. Small business concerns, family responsibilities, social obligations, religious observances, all woven together in the ordinary fabric of existence. Nothing feels dramatic or historically significant. It's just Tuesday, more or less. Just another morning in a city that has seen thousands of mornings and expects thousands more. The sun climbs higher, the heat intensifies. People begin seeking shade, slowing down, thinking about the afternoon siesta that will let them escape the worst of the day's heat. No one notices the slight tremor that runs through the ground. It's barely perceptible, just a tiny shake that makes a hanging oil lamp swing slightly. Earthquakes are common in this region. There was that big one 17 years ago, and smaller tremors happen all the time. Nothing to worry about. No one is looking at Vesuvius. Why would they? It's just a mountain, peaceful and green. Its slopes dotted with the white of villa walls, its peak often shrouded in afternoon clouds. The city goes about its business, completely unaware that the mountain is about to speak in a voice of fire and ash that will echo through millennia. But first, there's lunch to eat, deals to make, gossip to share, baths to enjoy. Life continues with the determined momentum of routine.
The sun reaches its zenith, and Pompeii surrenders to the heat. This is the quiet time, when sensible people retreat indoors, when shops close their shutters, when the streets empty except for dogs sleeping in patches of shade and the occasional slave running an urgent errand. Let's visit the public baths, the thermae, where much of Pompeii's social life unfolds.
These aren't just places to wash, they're community centers, networking hubs, gossip exchanges, and pleasure palaces all rolled into one steamy package. The Stabian baths are among the city's finest, a sprawling complex with separate facilities for men and women, though the men's side is considerably larger and more elaborate. Roman society loves these hierarchies, these little reminders of who matters more. You enter through the palaestra, an open courtyard surrounded by columns where young men exercise before bathing. They're wrestling, throwing javelins, practicing boxing moves with leather-wrapped hands. Their bodies gleam with olive oil. Romans don't have soap, so they oil themselves, exercise until they sweat, then scrape everything off with a curved bronze tool called a strigil. It's not exactly hygienic by modern standards, but it's how they stay clean. The entrance fee is minimal. Even poor citizens can afford to visit the baths regularly. This is deliberate policy. The wealthy pay for the construction and maintenance of public facilities as part of their civic duty, earning prestige and political support in return. It's a quid pro quo system. The rich get status, the poor get clean. Everyone maintains the fiction that they're all members of the same civic community. Inside, you encounter a series of rooms, each with a specific purpose and carefully controlled temperature. First comes the apoditarium, the changing room, where slaves take charge of your clothes while you transition from the dusty street to the ritual of cleanliness. The tepidarium is next, a warm room that acclimates your body to the heat. The walls are painted with scenes from mythology, Neptune wielding his trident, athletes crowned with victory laurels, dolphins leaping through stylized waves. The ceiling is vaulted and painted blue, creating the illusion of open sky. Benches line the walls, and men sit chatting, catching their breath, preparing for the caldarium. The caldarium is the hot room, heated by a hypocaust system, essentially a raised floor with space underneath for hot air to circulate. The walls are hot to the touch. Steam rises from a large bronze basin filled with heated water. Men sit sweating, their skin turning pink, their pores opening. Conversations here are languid, interrupted by long pauses as the heat saps energy. This is where deals get made. A merchant mentions he has surplus grain. Another man knows someone who needs exactly that. Introductions are arranged. Percentages are discussed. Hands are clasped in agreement, their grip slippery with sweat and oil. This is also where gossip flows. Did you hear about Senator Gaius and the dancer? What about the magistrate who got caught embezzling from the temple funds? Is it true that the Fullers Guild is planning to sponsor games next month? Politics, scandal, business, friendship, it all mingles in the steamy air. After sufficient sweating, bathers move to the frigidarium, the cold room, with a plunge pool filled with cool water. The shock of temperature is bracing, invigorating. Men gasp and laugh as they submerge, their heated skin tingling at the sudden cold. Some return to the tepidarium to warm up again, repeating the cycle. Others head to the massage rooms, where slaves work scented oil into tired muscles, kneading away the tension of daily labor. The whole process can take hours. This is where leisure and productivity merge. Romans conduct business while bathing, make political alliances while being scraped clean, arrange marriages while sitting naked in steam. Meanwhile, let's check in on different occupations across the city. At the bakery of Modestus, the afternoon is actually the busiest time. Bread bakes slowly in massive dome-shaped ovens heated by wood fires. The baker and his assistants work shirtless in the oppressive heat, their skin slick with sweat as they load and unload loaves using long wooden paddles. The bakery is also a mill. In the back room, 2 donkeys walk endless circles, turning massive millstones that grind wheat into flour. The donkeys wear blinders and move with the resigned patience of animals who've walked this same circle 10,000 times. The grinding creates a constant low rumble, punctuated by the baker shouting orders to his assistants. The bread they produce is coarse by modern standards. Roman flour is stone ground, which means tiny rock particles end up in the bread, gradually wearing down people's teeth over their lifetimes. Still, it's delicious when fresh, especially when dipped in olive oil or used to soak up the juices of a stew. The bakery's shop front is just a counter opening onto the street. Late afternoon is when people buy bread for dinner, so the baker keeps several varieties on display. Standard wheat loaves stamped with his seal, cheaper barley bread for poorer customers, special fine white bread for the wealthy, flatbreads brushed with herbs and garlic. A woman stops to buy a loaf, complaining loudly that the prices have risen again. The baker shrugs philosophically. Grain prices fluctuate. What can he do? She continues grumbling but pays the asking price. She needs bread. He knows she needs bread. They perform this little dance of complaint and acceptance because that's how market transactions work. Nearby, in the Fulonica of Stephanus, the fuller's establishment, different work unfolds. Fullers clean and process wool, a necessary step in cloth production, but one that involves chemicals and processes that assault the nose and eyes. Large clay vats stand in rows, filled with mixtures of water, urine, and alkali substances. Workers, slaves mostly, stamp on cloth in these vats, using their feet to work the cleaning agents through the fabric. It's exhausting work, and the fumes are harsh, but it produces clean, soft wool ready for dyeing or sale. The urine comes from public urinals stationed around the city, where the fuller pays a fee to collect it. Romans are practical people. Why waste a useful chemical just because it's also a waste product? It works beautifully for cleaning wool, removing oils, and preparing fabric to accept dyes. The establishment also does fine laundry for wealthy families. Togas, tunics, bed linens, these get special treatment, often brushed with a certain type of imported clay that acts as a cleansing agent and whitener. The owner, Stephanus, is a freedman, a former slave who earned or bought his freedom and now runs his own business. This is one of the great myths of Roman society, this idea that anyone can rise through hard work. The reality is more complicated. Most slaves never achieve freedom, and most freedmen remain economically dependent on their former masters. But the possibility exists, and that possibility justifies the whole hierarchical system. Over in the gladiator barracks, a different rhythm governs the afternoon. The gladiators have finished their morning training. They exercise early before the heat becomes unbearable, and now rest, eat, and prepare for upcoming games. These aren't the heroic warriors of Hollywood imagination. Many are slaves or criminals sentenced to fight for the entertainment of crowds. Some are volunteers, poor men who sign contracts exchanging their freedom for the chance to earn money, fame, and the adoration of fans. It's a terrible deal, but for men with no other options, terrible deals sometimes look like opportunities. The barracks are crowded and institutional, rows of small cells opening onto a central courtyard. The food is substantial. Gladiators need protein and calories, but monotonous. Barley porridge, beans, occasional meat. They're expensive investments, so they're kept fed and relatively healthy. A doctor checks on injuries from yesterday's training. One man has a bruised shoulder from a practice sword blow. Another has a cut that's looking infected. The doctor applies honey, which actually does have antibacterial properties, though Romans don't know why it works. The gladiators are a mix of types, each with specialized training. The Murmillo fights with sword and rectangular shield, dressed as a Roman soldier. The Retiarius uses a trident and net, wearing minimal armor. The Thrax carries a curved dagger and small round shield. They train in these specific styles, learning the moves and techniques that will, hopefully, keep them alive when they face each other in the arena. Some practice even in the afternoon heat, moving through forms and drills with the dedication of professional athletes, because that's what they are, ancient athlete entertainers whose sport happens to be actual combat. In a different part of the city, at the Temple of Isis,
priests conduct afternoon rituals. The temple is beautiful, painted in rich reds and golds, decorated with Egyptian motifs that look exotic to Roman eyes. Isis is a foreign goddess who has found a home in Pompeii, popular especially among women and the lower classes who appreciate her promise of personal salvation and protection. The priests are performing a purification ceremony. They've bathed in sacred water, dressed in linen robes, wool is forbidden in this temple, and now move through a series of prayers and offerings. They light incense, pour libations, chant in a mixture of Latin and transliterated Egyptian that they probably don't fully understand.
Religion in Pompeii is everywhere, but also oddly superficial. People make offerings and say prayers, but it's more like insurance than faith. You honor the gods to keep them happy, not because you have a deep theological belief system. The gods are powerful but capricious, and the smart move is to stay on their good side through regular maintenance offerings. A woman enters the temple with a specific request. She's been trying to conceive for 3 years. She brings offerings, honey cakes, coins, a small statue of a baby that she places at the goddess's feet. She prays for Isis's intervention, her voice low and desperate. The priest accepts her offerings and assures her that the goddess hears all prayers. Whether those prayers are answered is up to divine will, but the offerings definitely help get the goddess's attention. It's a comfortable arrangement. The temple gets donations, the suppliant gets hope, everyone maintains the system. By late afternoon, the heat begins to break. Shops reopen, streets refill. The city awakens from its siesta and prepares for the evening's activities. At the amphitheater at the edge of town, workers prepare for tomorrow's games. They rake the sand in the arena floor, repair damaged seating, check the mechanisms that operate the underground lifts that will raise animals and scenery into the arena. The amphitheater holds about 20,000 spectators, roughly the entire population of the city, and it's Pompeii's pride. Built 2 centuries ago, it's one of the oldest permanent stone amphitheaters in the Roman world. The city is justifiably proud. Tomorrow's games are particularly anticipated. A wealthy magistrate is spending lavishly to celebrate his son's election to local office. There will be exotic beasts brought from Africa, professional gladiators from Rome, elaborate executions of condemned criminals during the midday break. The animal handlers are already worried. They have a leopard that's refusing to eat and a bear that seems ill. Sick animals make for poor entertainment, and if the beasts don't perform properly, the whole spectacle suffers. The sun continues its descent toward the Bay of Naples. The light turns golden, that beautiful Mediterranean glow that painters spend careers trying to capture. Shadows lengthen, the day's heat lingers in the stones, radiating back into the evening air. At the various lupanares, the city's brothels, business is starting to pick up. These establishments range from upscale houses catering to wealthy clients to cramped cribs where services are quick and cheap. The Lupanor Grande is the city's most famous brothel, a 2-story building near the town center. The ground floor contains 10 small rooms, each with a stone bed, a mattress, and erotic frescoes on the walls showing various positions and acts. These pictures serve partly as decoration and partly as menu items. Literacy rates vary, but everyone can point to a picture. The women who work here are slaves or freed women with little choice in their circumstances. Some are local, some are imports from Greece, Egypt, or further east. They take names like Flora, Euplia, and Asalina, often false names that allow them to maintain some separation between their working lives and their private selves. The rooms are cramped and dark, lit only by oil lamps. The sound of commerce drifts from room to room, grunts, moans, the creak of rope bed frames, brief conversations. Outside each room, the name of the current occupant is scratched into the wall, along with prices and sometimes commentary from previous customers. Athenaeus, 2 asses, reads one inscription. Euplia was here with 2,000 beautiful men, boasts another. Vibius Restitutus slept here alone and missed his darling Urbana. Someone has carved with what might be genuine loneliness. The brothel keeper, a freedwoman named Spendusa, manages the establishment with business-like efficiency. She collects fees, resolves disputes, keeps order, and makes sure the oil lamps stay lit. It's not glamorous work, but it's profitable, and profit is what matters in this commercial city. Upstairs, in better rooms, with windows and actual furniture, more expensive transactions occur. These rooms cater to clients who want conversation along with sex, who desire the fantasy of romance rather than just quick release. One room holds a small party, 3 men and 2 women, wine flowing, music from a hard flute player, laughter that sounds almost genuine. This is less like prostitution and more like an elaborate dinner party where sex is just another course being served. Roman attitudes toward sex are practical and transactional. Marriage is about family alliances and producing legitimate children. Love, romantic love, is something that happens in poetry and sometimes in affairs. Sex is a physical need, like hunger or thirst, and the city provides outlets for that need the way it provides bakeries and wine shops. Nobody moralizes about men visiting brothels. It's expected, accepted, normal. The women working there are looked down upon socially, but their services are considered necessary. It's one of those Roman contradictions, simultaneously despising and depending on the same thing. As evening approaches, the streets fill with purpose. This is when Pompeii truly comes alive, when the day's business gives way to the evening's pleasures.
The sun touches the horizon, painting the Bay of Naples in shades of orange and pink. The heat finally breaks, and a breeze from the sea brings relief and the smell of salt water. This is the magical hour when Pompeii transforms from a working city into a playground. Let's follow a group of young men as they prepare for their evening. They're not wealthy. They work as scribes, shopkeepers' assistants, junior clerks in merchant offices, but they have some money to spend and the whole evening stretching ahead like a promise. They meet at a thermopolium near the Forum, the same kind of fast food establishment where Lucius had his morning wine. The proprietor, a cheerful Syrian named Eucinus, knows them by name. He pours cups of wine, not the expensive stuff, but decent enough when mixed with water and warmed with honey. The young men are loud, full of that aggressive masculine energy that young men everywhere display when in groups. They boast about sexual conquests, argue about gladiators, mock each other's fashion choices. One of them has a new girlfriend and can't stop talking about her, earning both congratulations and crude jokes from his friends. They're deciding what to do with their evening. There are several options. They could go to the theater. There's a comedy playing, something by Plautus about mistaken identity and clever slaves. They could hit the taverns and see where the night takes them. They could gamble. There's a dice game running at a bar near the city walls that's been going all day. Or they could just walk, drink, talk, and enjoy being young and relatively free in a city designed for pleasure. They decide on a pub crawl, starting at a bar called the Caupona of Eucinus, coincidentally owned by our thermopolium proprietor's brother. It's a family business. The bar is already crowded, filled with off-duty soldiers from the garrison, merchants who've closed their shops for the day, a few women whose occupation is obvious from their heavy makeup and praising looks. The walls are covered in graffiti, layers upon layers of messages scratched by customers over the years. Lovers, like bees, lead a honeyed life. Restitutus says, "Restituta, take off your tunic, please, and show us your hairy privates. Weep, you girls, my penis has given you up. Now it penetrates men's behinds. Goodbye, wondrous femininity." The Romans were remarkably frank about sex in their public writing, mixing poetry and pornography with the casual ease of people who didn't inherit centuries of Christian sexual anxiety. The wine flows, conversations grow louder. Someone starts singing a popular song, something bawdy about a farmer's daughter and a traveling salesman. Others join in, their voices rough but enthusiastic. A fight almost breaks out when one patron accuses another of cheating at dice, but the bar owner intervenes quickly. He can't afford to let brawls damage his reputation or his furniture. The accusers are separated, offered free drinks as peace offerings, and the tension diffuses. Our group of young men moves on to another establishment, the Caupona of Salvius, famous for its strong wine and attractive serving girls. The interior is small, just a few tables and benches, but it opens to a garden courtyard where oil lamps hang from trees, creating islands of light in the gathering darkness. Here they encounter a different crowd. There are older men, merchants, and ship captains discussing business in low voices. There are women dining in small groups, some respectable matrons enjoying an evening out, others clearly working girls on the hunt for clients. There are tourists from other cities, identifiable by their accents and their fascination with everything they see.
The food on offer is substantial. Grilled sausages, bread dipped in olive oil, small fried fish, olives, cheese, chickpeas cooked with herbs. The Romans are developing a sophisticated food culture, learning to combine flavors and textures in ways that foreshadow modern Mediterranean cuisine. Our young men order everything, their voices boisterous, their appetites enormous. They're drinking more heavily now, the wine going to their heads, loosening inhibitions. One of them makes a clumsy pass at a serving girl, who deflects it with practiced ease. She's dealt with drunk young men before. They tip well if you handle them right. The conversation turns to politics. There's an election coming up for aedile, a local magistracy responsible for public buildings, markets, and games. Different candidates are advertising everywhere, their slogans painted on walls throughout the city. The fruit dealers, together with Helvius Vestalis, unanimously urged the election of Marcus Halconius Priscus as duumvir with judicial power. The worshippers of Isis unanimously urged the election of Gnaeus Helvius Sabinus as aedile. The young men argue about who deserves their support. It's mostly about which candidate has promised better games and festivals. Actual policy positions matter less than entertainment value. The evening deepens, stars emerge in the darkening sky. The temperature drops to something almost comfortable. The city's noise level rises as more people fill the streets seeking entertainment, companionship, distraction from daily concerns. At the large theater near the gladiator barracks, a comedy is, indeed, playing. The theater holds about 5,000 spectators on its semicircular stone benches, and it's nearly full tonight. The play is a revival of Plautus's Pseudolus. A clever slave helps his master's son win the girl he loves by outwitting everyone around them. The audience loves it. They laugh at the jokes, hiss the villain, cheer the hero. Theater here is participatory. People shout comments, throw food at actors playing unpopular characters, sing along with musical numbers. It's rowdy and democratic in a way that Roman society usually isn't. The actors wear masks that exaggerate their features and help project their voices. They move with exaggerated gestures. Subtle acting doesn't work in a theater this size. Everything is big, bold, broad comedy aimed at the widest possible audience. Between acts, vendors move through the crowd selling snacks and drinks. Prostitutes work the aisles, negotiating quick transactions that will be completed in the shadows behind the theater. Pickpockets ply their trade, targeting drunk or distracted patrons. Meanwhile, at a different venue, a smaller, more exclusive gathering, a different kind of performance unfolds. In the peristyle garden of a wealthy citizen's house, invited guests recline on couches arranged around a central pool, listening to a poet recite his latest verses. This is high culture, the preserve of the educated elite. The poetry is in Greek, still the language of sophisticated literature despite Rome's political dominance. The verses deal with love, loss, the brevity of life, the beauty of nature. They're technically accomplished and emotionally remote, the kind of art that flatters its audience's taste while never truly challenging them. The host, a man named Quintus, is using this gathering to demonstrate his culture and sophistication. His house is beautiful. Walls painted with elaborate frescoes showing mythological scenes, floors decorated with intricate mosaics, gardens perfumed with roses and jasmine. Slaves circulate with trays of delicacies,
dormice cooked in honey, oysters imported from Britannia, exotic fruits from Africa and Asia. The guests recline Roman-style, propped on one elbow, eating with their fingers, occasionally pausing to wipe their hands on bread that will later be thrown to the dogs. Conversation flows between recitations, discussions of philosophy, literature, current events in Rome, speculation about Emperor Titus's policies. This is Pompeii's elite, the top few percent who control the city's wealth and power. They're cultured, cosmopolitan, comfortable. They quote Greek poets, debate Stoic philosophy, and congratulate themselves on living in civilization's center.
They have no idea that they're actually living on a volcano. Back in the streets, our young men have moved on to yet another bar, this one featuring games of chance. Dice games are everywhere in Pompeii. They're illegal, officially, but the law is rarely enforced. Everyone gambles, from slaves betting copper coins to senators wagering estates. The games are simple. Roll the dice, highest number wins, with various elaborations and side bets to keep things interesting. Our young men lose money, win some back, lose more. The wine keeps flowing. Hours blur together. One of them gets into a philosophical mood, the kind of drunken profundity that young men sometimes achieve. He starts talking about fate, destiny, the meaning of life. His friends mostly ignore him, but one engages, and they have a surprisingly coherent conversation about whether the gods control human destiny or whether we forge our own paths. It's the eternal question, and they have no more answer than anyone else, but the wine makes them feel wise, and the night makes them feel immortal. A woman approaches their table. Not a prostitute, or at least not obviously so. She's attractive, well-dressed, confident. She starts chatting with one of the young men, and his friends discreetly drift away, giving him space to work whatever magic he might possess. The city around them pulses with life. Music drifts from various venues, the theater's flute and drums, someone playing a lyre in a garden, a group of drunk men singing as they stagger home. Dogs bark, babies cry. Somewhere, someone is having an argument loud enough to make neighbors lean out their windows and shout for quiet. At the amphitheater, workers continue their preparations for tomorrow's games by torchlight. They're testing the underground mechanisms, making sure the lifts work smoothly, checking that the animal cages are secure. The leopard is still refusing food, which worries everyone. A sick leopard could ruin the whole beast hunt segment. The city's night watchmen begin their rounds. Vigiles, they're called, serving as both firefighters and police. They're mostly freedmen and slaves, paid poorly, respected less, but performing necessary work. They check that street lamps are lit, break up fights that get too violent, watch for fires in a city where most buildings are wood and plaster, waiting to burn. In wealthier homes, dinner parties wind down. The cena, the main meal, has been served. Multiple courses of fish, meat, vegetables, fruit, all washed down with copious wine. Some guests are getting drunk, others are already making excuses to leave. The host's slaves begin clearing dishes, knowing they'll be up late cleaning and preparing for tomorrow. At the Lupanerai, business continues. Some clients are regulars, who the women know by name. Others are visitors to the city, tourists or merchants in town for business. Some are young men losing their virginity with a mixture of excitement and terror. Others are old men seeking comfort more than passion. The brothel keeper has a practiced eye for trouble. She ejects one client who's getting aggressive, keeps another from drinking too much, mediates a dispute over pricing. It's exhausting work, and she's been doing it for 20 years. Her dream is to save enough money to buy a small shop and retire from this business, but that dream keeps receding as expenses eat her savings. Our group of young men ends their evening at a small, quiet bar near the city walls. They're drunk, but not incapacitated, tired, but satisfied with their night. They've spent money they probably couldn't afford, made fools of themselves multiple times, and thoroughly enjoyed every minute. They talk about tomorrow. Back to work, back to routine, back to the daily grind. But tonight was theirs. A few hours of freedom and pleasure in a world that offers those things sparingly. They stagger home through streets that are finally quieting. Most people are asleep now, or at least indoors. Only the vigiles, the desperate, and the drunk still walk the streets. The city settles into its late-night rhythms. In poor neighborhoods, entire families sleep crowded into single rooms, their snores and sighs creating a chorus of human vulnerability. In wealthy houses, slaves bank the fires, trim the lamps, and lock the doors before retiring to their own cramped quarters. The moon rises over Vesuvius, painting the mountain in silver light. It looks peaceful, almost protective, watching over the sleeping city like a benevolent god. It is anything but benevolent. Deep underground, magma is rising through the volcano's throat. Pressure is building. The mountain is preparing to clear its throat in a roar that will obliterate everything within miles. But that's still hours away. For now, Pompeii sleeps, dreams, and prepares for a tomorrow that most of its residents will never see. The young men reach their homes and collapse into their beds, still drunk, already starting to develop the hangovers that will plague them in the morning. They fall asleep quickly, deeply, without any sense that this is the last normal night of their lives. The city breathes in its sleep. The night watchmen continue their rounds. A baby cries somewhere. A dog barks at nothing. Life continues its usual patterns, ordinary and eternal. Until, suddenly, terribly, it won't be.
The morning of August 24th, 79 AD, begins like any other. The same roosters crow, the same bakers light their ovens, the same children complain about their lessons, the same merchants worry about their shipments and their debts. But something is different, though most people don't notice it yet. Animals are restless. Dogs bark more than usual, horses shy at nothing. Birds congregate in unusual numbers. Some of the older residents, those who remember the earthquake of 62 AD, feel a subtle anxiety they can't quite name. The morning progresses normally. People shop, work, gossip, argue. At the Forum, a case is being heard in the Basilica, something about a disputed inheritance. In the amphitheater, final preparations continue for tomorrow's games. In the thermae, men soak and scheme. It's approximately 1 p.m. when Vesuvius announces its intentions. The explosion is unlike anything the city has ever heard. It's not just loud, it's a physical force, a shock wave that rattles buildings and knocks people off their feet. Every head in Pompeii turns toward the mountain. Where Vesuvius once stood, there's now a column of ash and smoke rising into the sky, climbing miles high in minutes. It looks like a pine tree, its trunk straight and dark, its crown spreading out as it reaches the upper atmosphere. This image will be so striking that Pliny the Younger, who witnesses the eruption from across the bay, will describe it in letters that survive to our time. For a moment, the city freezes. Everyone stops what they're doing and stares at the impossible sight. Some people start praying immediately. Others laugh nervously, certain this is just a dramatic show that will soon end. A few, the elderly who remember earthquakes, the educated who've read about volcanoes in distant lands, feel ice water flooding their veins because they understand what's happening. The mountain is exploding. The column of ash continues rising, driven by unimaginable thermal forces. Hot gases and pulverized rock shoot upward at hundreds of miles per hour. The sound is continuous now, a roar that drowns out everything else, a thunderclap that never ends. Then the wind shifts, and the column begins to drift. It spreads out like an umbrella opening, and its shadow starts moving across the land, heading directly toward Pompeii. This is when people start to panic. The streets fill with confused citizens. Some run toward their homes, others run toward the city gates. Many simply stand and stare, unable to process what they're seeing. It's too big, too strange, too far outside normal experience. At the amphitheater, the work crew abandons their tasks and flees. At the forum, the legal case is forgotten as lawyers and judges rush outside. In the thermae, men grab their clothes and run, not bothering to dry off or dress properly. The first ash begins to fall about 2 p.m. It starts as a light rain of gray flakes, almost pretty if you ignore the context. Children catch them on their tongues before their parents slap their hands away. The ash is hot, not burning hot, but uncomfortable to touch. Within minutes, the ashfall intensifies. It comes down in thick gray sheets, accumulating on roofs, in streets, on people's hair and clothes. It's accompanied by pumice stones, light porous rocks that rain from the sky like deadly hail. They're small at first, the size of nuts, but they grow larger as the eruption continues.
People scramble for cover. Some retreat indoors, barring doors and shuttering windows. Others grab what valuables they can carry and run for the gates. The streets become chaos, people pushing, shoving, screaming, crying. Let's follow a family, making the terrible calculations that this day demands. Marcus, a baker we haven't met before, stands in his shop with his wife, 2 children, and elderly mother. Pumice stones are falling like heavy snow, bouncing off roofs, breaking terracotta tiles, piling up in drifts. His wife wants to leave immediately. His mother refuses to move. She's 70 years old, walks with difficulty, and is certain the disaster will pass soon. The children are crying, terrified by the noise and the darkness. The ash cloud is blocking the sun, turning afternoon into twilight. Marcus faces an impossible choice. If they flee, his mother probably won't survive the journey. If they stay, they're trapped in a building that's already groaning under the weight of accumulating ash. If the roof collapses, they all die. He decides to stay. They retreat to an interior room away from windows, taking food, water, and blankets. The mother prays to the household gods. The wife holds the children close. Marcus watches the ash pile higher and feels his decision settling on him, like the weight of the pumice itself. Outside, others are making different choices. Gaius and Lucia, the children from our merchant family at the beginning, are with their father at his warehouse. Their mother, Julia, pregnant and slow-moving, is at home. Lucius makes the practical decision. He takes the children and runs for the harbor. Ships are still in the bay. If they can reach one, they might escape by sea. They join a stream of refugees heading toward the marina. The ash is angled deep now, making walking difficult. Pumice stones strike people's heads and shoulders. One man falls, struck by a particularly large stone, and doesn't get up. People step over him without stopping. The harbor is chaos. Ships are trying to leave, but the waters are churned by underwater quakes, and the harbor is filling with pumice and debris. Some captains are charging exorbitant fees for passage. Others are simply pulling up anchor and leaving whoever remains behind. Lucius manages to get his children onto a small merchant vessel, paying with every coin he has and promising more. The captain accepts, not because he's kind, but because he knows he'll never have to collect the debt. These people are as good as dead already. The ship pulls away from the dock, just as a wave of refugees arrives, their hands reaching out, their voices pleading. The captain ignores them. His ship is overloaded already. Adding more people would risk capsizing. Lucius watches Pompeii recede through the ash-darkened air. His city is disappearing under a gray blanket. His wife is somewhere in there, and he'll never see her again, though he doesn't know that yet. Hope is stubborn, even in catastrophe. Back in the city, the situation is deteriorating rapidly. Ash and pumice have accumulated several feet deep. Roofs are collapsing under the weight. People trapped in buildings are dying from falling debris or from suffocation. The ash is incredibly fine, choking lungs, making every breath a struggle. Some people make the opposite choice from Marcus the baker. They've stayed indoors for hours, but now their buildings are groaning and cracking. They decide to run. A wealthy woman named Rectina emerges from her villa wrapped in gold jewelry and clutching a bag of valuables. She makes it perhaps 100 feet before a larger pumice stone strikes her head. She falls and doesn't move. The ash continues to pile up around her body, beginning the process of burial that will preserve her for millennia. In the gladiator barracks, the fighters are trapped. The barracks master locked them in hours ago. Can't have valuable property escaping in the chaos. Now, the building is collapsing. Some gladiators die in their cells, chained and helpless. Others break free and try to escape, but the city is a maze of ash-choked streets and collapsing structures. 2 gladiators make it as far as the city wall before being overtaken. They die together, their bodies found centuries later, still wearing the chains they couldn't remove. By 8 p.m., Pompeii is buried under more than 6 feet of ash and pumice. Most buildings have collapsed. The streets are impassable canyons filled with debris. It's completely dark. The ash cloud blocks all light, and there's no way to navigate. Those still alive are mostly people who found shelter in sturdy buildings or in interior rooms where roofs haven't collapsed. They huddle together, breathing through cloths held over their faces, praying to every god they know. They don't know that the worst is yet to come.
Around midnight, the eruption enters a new phase. The column of ash that's been rising into the sky for hours suddenly collapses. The eruption can no longer sustain the column's height, and millions of tons of superheated ash, gas, and rock come crashing down. This creates what volcanologists would later call a pyroclastic surge, a ground-hugging avalanche of gas and debris moving at over 100 miles per hour and heated to over 500 degrees Fahrenheit. The first surge hits Herculaneum, a town closer to Vesuvius that's been spared the worst of the ashfall. The surge vaporizes people instantly, boiling their brains and bursting their skulls from internal pressure. Those who sought shelter in boathouses by the beach die in seconds, their bodies carbonized and preserved in the positions they held at death. The second and third surges reach Pompeii around 7 a.m. on August 25th. Marcus the baker is still alive, huddled with his family in their interior room. They're terrified, but surviving. The ash has stopped falling. Marcus is beginning to think they might actually make it. Then the walls blow in, and superheated gas floods the room. They don't burn, the temperature isn't quite high enough for that, but they die instantly from thermal shock and asphyxiation. Marcus dies trying to shield his children with his body. It doesn't help. Throughout the buried city, the same scene repeats. People die in doorways, in bedrooms, in cellars where they sought shelter. Some die curled in fetal positions. Others die standing up, overcome so quickly they didn't have time to fall. The heat and gas preserve their final moments. The surges are followed by more ash and pumice, burying the city under a total of about 20 feet of volcanic material. Buildings that survived the initial eruption are now crushed flat. The city disappears from view, erased from the landscape. By noon on August 25th, it's over. The eruption stops. The ash cloud begins to dissipate. Survivors in the surrounding area emerge to find their world transformed. Where cities once stood, there are now gray, lumpy plains that smoke and steam. Pompeii is gone. Herculaneum is gone. Thousands are dead. The survivors are traumatized, homeless, destitute. The Emperor Titus will organize relief efforts, but for most people, their entire worlds have ended in fire and ash. The mountain that did this will eventually grow quiet, becoming just another landmark on the Italian coast. Over the centuries, people will forget that Pompeii ever existed. The city will become a bump in the landscape, covered with soil and grass, used as pasture for sheep. Until 1748, when excavations begin and the buried city starts to emerge from its tomb, preserved in incredible detail by the very disaster that destroyed it. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's stay in the aftermath, in the gray silence of August 25th, when the world is still trying to understand what just happened. The days after the eruption are surreal. Survivors wander the edges of the ash-covered wasteland that used to be their home. Some are looking for family members, calling names into the silence, hoping for responses that never come. Others are looking for anything salvageable: money, jewelry, supplies. The Emperor Titus, who's only been in power for 2 months, responds with reasonable efficiency. He sends aid: food, money, temporary housing. He sends surveyors to assess the damage and engineers to begin cleanup efforts in areas where cleanup is possible. But Pompeii is beyond saving. The city is buried too deeply. The cost of excavating 20 feet of compacted ash and pumice exceeds any possible benefit. So the decision is made, probably without much debate. Pompeii will be abandoned. Property owners are given compensation for their losses, at least the ones who can prove ownership. Many documents were destroyed in the eruption. Many witnesses are dead. Sorting out who owned what becomes a legal nightmare that occupies courts for years. Some people try to dig down to their homes, hoping to retrieve buried valuables. A few succeed, tunneling through the ash to find rooms relatively intact. They recover coins, jewelry, family heirlooms. But it's dangerous work. The ash is unstable, tunnels collapse, and several treasure hunters die in the attempt. Eventually, even these efforts cease. The buried cities are simply abandoned, forgotten, erased from active memory. Within a generation, most people in the region don't remember exactly where Pompeii was. The city becomes a story, then a legend, then nothing. The landscape changes. Rain and vegetation slowly cover the ash. The bumps and mounds smooth out. Trees grow. Farms are established on the enriched volcanic soil. Life continues, as it always does, building new patterns over old tragedies. For 17 centuries, Pompeii sleeps. But while the city sleeps, it preserves. The ash that killed everything also protected it. Organic materials decay, yes. Wood rots, cloth disintegrates, bodies decompose. But the ash creates perfect molds of everything it buries: doors, furniture, food, even human bodies. Leave cavities in the ash, negative spaces that preserve their exact shapes.
Buildings remain largely intact under their blanket. Frescoes are protected from weather and sunlight. Mosaics stay in place. Amphorae full of wine or oil or grain stand in their racks. The city becomes a time capsule, accidentally preserving a single day in extraordinary detail. The rediscovery begins, appropriately enough, with construction work. In 1599, workers digging a canal through the area uncovered ancient walls and painted frescoes. The architect in charge, Domenico Fontana, makes note of the discovery but doesn't investigate further. This is before archaeology exists as a discipline, before people value ancient artifacts. The walls are interesting but not important. The work continues. In 1748, the King of Naples, Charles III, sponsors excavations at a nearby site that will turn out to be Herculaneum. These early digs are less archaeology and more treasure hunting. Workers tunnel into the buried city looking for statues, jewelry, anything valuable or beautiful. When they run out of easily accessible treasures in Herculaneum, they start looking elsewhere. Someone remembers Fontana's discovery. Excavations begin at Pompeii in 1748, and immediately the diggers realize they've found something extraordinary. Unlike Herculaneum, which was buried under dense pyroclastic material that hardened into rock, Pompeii is buried under looser ash and pumice. It's relatively easy to excavate, and what they find is astonishing: an entire Roman city, preserved exactly as it was on August 24, 79 AD. The early excavations are crude by modern standards. Workers dig down from above, exposing roofs and upper floors first, taking anything valuable, then moving on. Buildings are sometimes damaged or destroyed in the process. No one makes detailed records. Archaeological context is ignored in favor of finding beautiful objects to impress wealthy patrons. But even these clumsy efforts reveal wonders: perfectly preserved frescoes showing scenes from mythology and daily life, mosaics of incredible intricacy, statues, jewelry, household items, graffiti, bakeries with bread still in the ovens, wine shops with counters and storage jars, a city speaking across millennia. The excavations attract attention from scholars and tourists throughout Europe. Pompeii becomes a grand tour destination. No educated person's trip to Italy is complete without visiting the buried city. Artists come to sketch and paint. Writers come to romanticize. Everyone comes to gaze at antiquity made tangible. In 1863, Giuseppe Fiorelli becomes director of excavations and revolutionizes the process. He introduces systematic excavation from ground level down, preserves buildings in place rather than stripping them, and keeps detailed records of everything found. Fiorelli also develops the technique that will make Pompeii famous beyond archaeological circles: plaster casts of the dead. He realizes that the cavities in the ash, the negative spaces left when bodies decomposed, can be filled with plaster to create perfect casts of the victims. The technique works beautifully, preserving the final moments of Pompeii's residents in haunting detail. There's the man who died shielding his face with his arms, the woman who died clutching her gold jewelry, the dog chained to a post, dying as it tried to break free, the family huddled together, the gladiators in chains, the pregnant woman, the child holding a parent's hand. These casts transformed Pompeii from an archaeological site into something more emotional and immediate. These aren't just ancient people, abstractions from history books. They're individuals with faces and expressions, captured in their last seconds of life. The casts affect people deeply. They make the disaster real in a way that buildings and pottery never could. Visitors to Pompeii see themselves in these frozen faces: the same fear, the same desperate hope, the same fundamental vulnerability that all humans share. The excavations continue throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, slowly uncovering more of the city. Each shovelful of ash reveals new details about Roman life: how they built their homes, what they ate, how they decorated their walls, what jokes they found funny, who they loved, what they feared. We learn that Romans ate fast food from thermopolia, just like modern people grab takeout. We learn that they had restaurants, bars, hotels, all the infrastructure of urban life. We learn that they worried about water quality, argued about politics, complained about noisy neighbors, and gossiped about affairs and scandals.
We learned that they had sophisticated engineering, running water, public baths, impressive roads. They had art and literature and theater. They had social hierarchies and class conflicts and ongoing debates about how society should function. We learn, in short, that they were people remarkably like us, with the same basic concerns and desires, just living in a different time with different technologies. The brothels of Pompeii scandalize Victorian-era excavators, who try to restrict access to them. The erotic frescoes are covered or removed. The phallic symbols that Romans used as good luck charms are carefully hidden from public view. Later, more open-minded eras will study these artifacts without embarrassment, recognizing them as legitimate windows into Roman sexuality and culture.
The graffiti proves particularly valuable for understanding ordinary Romans. Elite writers left formal literature, but common people left their thoughts on walls. I don't want to sell my husband, not for all the gold in the world. On April 19th, I made bread. Defecator, may everything turn out okay so that you can leave this place. Theophilus, don't perform oral sex on girls against the city wall like a dog. These casual inscriptions reveal daily life in ways that formal histories never could. They're immediate, personal, unfiltered, the social media of the ancient world. Modern excavations use technologies the early diggers couldn't imagine. Ground-penetrating radar to find structures before digging. 3D scanning to create perfect digital records. DNA analysis of bones and teeth to understand diet and health. Chemical analysis of food residues to reconstruct ancient recipes. Scientists study the plaster casts with forensic precision, determining ages, causes of death, even identifying family relationships. CT scans reveal bones inside the casts, showing injuries, diseases, and the physical toll of Roman life. The work continues today. Only about 2/3 of Pompeii has been excavated. The rest remains buried, deliberately preserved for future archaeologists who will have better techniques and technologies. Every few years, new discoveries emerge: a house with undamaged frescoes, a shop with its inventory intact, inscriptions that add to our understanding of Roman life. One of the most poignant discoveries came in the 1960s, the Garden of the Fugitives. 13 bodies were found in what had been an orchard, huddled together, trying to escape the pyroclastic surge. The plaster casts show adults trying to protect children, people holding each other, a group facing death together. These victims had survived the initial eruption and ashfall. They'd endured hours of terror as their city was buried. They decided to run when the ash stopped falling, thinking the worst was over. They almost made it to the city walls, to safety and open country beyond. Almost. The surge caught them just steps from escape. They died within sight of survival, victims of timing as much as of the volcano. Their casts are displayed together now. A family or group of friends, or perhaps just strangers who found each other in catastrophe. Visitors stand before them in silence, reading their own meanings into the frozen gestures, the clutching hands, the final embrace. Pompeii teaches us many things. It teaches us about Roman civilization, their engineering, art, politics, daily life. It teaches us about volcanic disasters and how they unfold. It teaches us about the power of preservation, how accidents of geology can create windows into the past that deliberate efforts could never achieve. But perhaps most importantly, Pompeii teaches us about mortality and the fragility of human life. The people of Pompeii went about their ordinary routines on August 24, 79 AD, with no idea it would be their last day. They argued about trivial things, worried about small problems, made plans for a future that would never arrive. They were confident in the permanence of their city, their civilization, their lives. And then a mountain spoke, and everything ended. It's a lesson that resonates across the centuries. We too live with false confidence in the stability of our world. We too make plans assuming tomorrow will be like today. We too worry about small things while ignoring larger dangers. The modern tourist walking through Pompeii's streets experiences a peculiar double vision. On one hand, the city feels incredibly foreign. The layout is strange, the buildings unfamiliar, the decorations exotic, the whole Roman way of life alien to our modern sensibilities. But on the other hand, Pompeii feels remarkably familiar. The graffiti could be modern tweets. The bar signs advertising their specialties could be from any city today. The family houses with their private and social spaces mirror our own split between personal and social life.
The love poetry scratched on walls expresses emotions we still feel. The jokes and insults show a humor we recognize.
Walk down the main streets and you can almost hear the ancient crowds, vendors hawking their wares, children playing, arguments spilling out of workshops, laughter from taverns. The ghosts are so present that you forget, momentarily, that they're ghosts at all. Then you turn a corner and see the plaster casts, those frozen figures from August 25th, 79 AD, and the full weight of tragedy crashes back. These were real people. They lived, laughed, loved, worked, worried. And they died terribly, unexpectedly, unfairly. Vesuvius still looms over the ruins, green and peaceful, wearing forests where vineyards once grew. It last erupted in 1944, a relatively minor event that nonetheless reminded everyone that the mountain is still active, still dangerous. Today, 3 million people live in the shadow of Vesuvius, in Naples and the surrounding towns. They know the risk. They've seen Pompeii. They understand what the mountain can do. Yet they stay, because it's home, because the soil is rich, because life demands we live somewhere, and every somewhere carries its own dangers. Scientists monitor the mountain constantly now, with seismographs and gas sensors and satellite measurements. If it shows signs of erupting, there will be warnings, evacuations, time to escape that Pompeii never had. Probably. Maybe. Hopefully. But volcanoes are unpredictable, and certainty is an illusion we maintain to keep functioning. The people of Pompeii thought they were safe too. They'd lived their whole lives under that mountain. It had always been there, always been quiet, except for those earthquakes, but those had stopped. Why would it suddenly become dangerous? The answer, of course, is that nature doesn't care about our assumptions or our convenience. The mountain had its own schedule, its own processes, completely indifferent to the human lives it would destroy. This indifference is perhaps the most disturbing lesson of Pompeii. The eruption wasn't punishment from angry gods, though that's how Romans interpreted it. It wasn't revenge or justice or meaningful in any human sense. It was just geology, magma rising, pressure building, physics following its inevitable path to explosive release. The 20,000 people who died were no more or less deserving than the survivors. The disaster didn't discriminate between good and evil, rich and poor, slave and free. The mountain simply exploded, and whoever was nearby died, and that was that. It's a truth that sits uncomfortably with our human desire for meaning, for stories where outcomes reflect character or where disasters happen for reasons. Pompeii offers no such comfort. It simply says, you are small, nature is powerful, and sometimes your luck runs out. And yet, and this is important, Pompeii also demonstrates human resilience and memory. The city died, but it lived again through excavation and study. The people died, but they speak to us across 2 millennia through their graffiti, their art, their preserved final moments. We remember Pompeii not as a cautionary tale about hubris or divine punishment, but as a precious snapshot of ordinary Roman life. The disaster that destroyed the city also preserved it, creating an accidental museum that has taught us more about the ancient world than almost any other site. The tourists who visit today, millions every year, are participating in a strange communion with the dead. They walk the same streets, stand in the same buildings, see the same frescoes that the Pompeians saw in 79 AD. The plaster casts make that connection visceral and immediate in a way that usually only imagination provides. Some visitors find it morbid, this tourism of tragedy. Others find it profound. Most find it both, uncomfortable but compelling, disturbing but educational, a confrontation with mortality that's impossible to look away from. Children run through the streets, laughing and playing among the ruins, their joy incongruous against the backdrop of ancient death. But perhaps that's appropriate. Life continues, always, building new patterns over old sorrows. The dead don't need our permanent solemnity. They just need to be remembered. And Pompeii is remembered. Its name is known worldwide. Its story is told in books and documentaries. Its ruins attract scholars and tourists in equal numbers. The city that died in a day has achieved an immortality its residents never imagined. Every artifact we pull from the ash adds to our understanding. Every inscription we translate adds another voice to the chorus. Every house we excavate reveals new details about how people lived, what they valued, what they feared. We learn that they loved their families. We learned that they worked hard and complained about their bosses. We learned that they fell in love and had their hearts broken. We learned that they took pride in their work and their homes. We learned that they enjoyed good food, good wine, good company. We learn, in short, that they were human, exactly as we are human, separated from us by time, but not by nature.
The volcanic ash that killed them also gave them this strange immortality. It preserved their world in such detail that we can reconstruct their lives more completely than we can reconstruct medieval or even early modern societies. We know more about daily life in Pompeii than we know about daily life in many periods that are much closer to our own time. This is Pompeii's final gift, not just the artifacts and buildings, but the intimate knowledge of what it meant to be human in that particular time and place. The disaster became a teacher. The tragedy became a window. The ending became a new beginning of understanding. As night falls over the ruins today, as the last tourists leave and the gates close, as shadows lengthen across ancient stones, you can almost imagine the city as it was. The lamps being lit in shops and homes, the smell of dinner cooking, the sound of conversation and laughter, the ordinary miracle of daily life unfolding. And then you remember that those lamps were extinguished forever on August 25th, 79 AD. Those dinners were never eaten. Those conversations were cut short. The ordinary miracle ended in fire and ash. But here, in the ruins, in the careful preservation, in the ongoing excavations, in the millions who visit and remember, here Pompeii still lives, not as it was, but as something new, a memorial, a museum, a message from the past that speaks across centuries about the beauty and fragility of human existence.
So now, as you lie in your comfortable bed, safe from volcanoes and ancient disasters, let the story of Pompeii settle over you like a blanket. Not a heavy blanket of tragedy, but a gentle reminder of what matters. Those people in Pompeii, they were worrying about all the small things we worry about. Bills, relationships, work, what people thought of them, whether they'd be successful, whether they'd be happy. And none of those worries mattered in the end, but all of them mattered while they lived. That's the paradox of human life. Everything is simultaneously important and meaningless, depending on the scale you choose. On the cosmic scale, we're all just brief sparks, here for a moment and then gone. On the human scale, every moment matters. Every connection means something. Every laugh and tear and conversation is infinitely valuable. Pompeii teaches us to hold both truths at once. Live fully, because life is precious and brief.
But also, let go of small worries, because in the grand scheme, they don't define your worth or your story. The people of Pompeii made bread and loved their children and argued with their neighbors and felt joy and sorrow and boredom and wonder, just like you do. They didn't know they'd be remembered. They didn't know their city would speak to the future. They just lived as fully as they could with what they had. And that's enough. That's always been enough. Your breath is slowing now. Your body is relaxing. The story is over, but its echoes remain, gentle and distant. Somewhere in Italy, moonlight falls on ancient stones. The ruins sleep. The ghosts rest. The mountain stands silent for now. And you're safe, warm, comfortable. Tomorrow will come, and you'll face it with whatever courage and wisdom you can muster. But tonight, you can let everything go. Let the bread bakers rest. Let the merchants put down their accounts. Let the families gather one last time. Let the city sleep as it has slept for centuries, patient and peaceful under its blanket of ash. Your eyes are heavy. Your thoughts are drifting. The past is the past, and you are here, now, in this moment, breathing slowly, sinking deeper. The story ends. The night continues. And somewhere between the two, you find the sleep you've been seeking. Rest well. The ancient world can wait until morning. The ruins aren't going anywhere. The lessons will still be there when you wake. For now, just breathe. Just rest. Just let go. Pompeii sleeps, and so can you. Good night.